Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate, the Championship podcast. We've got a plethora of guests for you this afternoon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Johnny from the Takes That Chance podcast. Johnny, first of all, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate your time. Just talk to us about Darren Moore's first 3 games in charge. Obviously, we're starting with successive 1-1 draws against Coventry and Ipswich, and then a 4-1 loss to Birmingham last night.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think he has had 3 tough games. He's not had a whole lot of time to work with the players, and I think we have seen some couple of subtle differences, looking to play a bit quicker, get into transitions quicker, get the ball back on the field quicker, not so much kind of time wasted and taking things slowly. Before last night, I'd say it probably gone relatively well. Coventry, a tough opponent. Ipswich, a really tough opponent, and that point looks even better after last night's results as well. Sure. But Birmingham, probably a slight downward trend on that trajectory, but it's still very early days, so it's still quite hard to judge, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of Darren Moore's main strengths is how well he comes across in the media, and probably his man management qualities. Has that been apparent from the first couple of weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. I think that's what we heard from Sheffield Wednesday fans and West Brom fans alike, that he's a great custodian of that role within the club. He takes it with great respect. Obviously, on the pitch is where he'll generally be analysed, and you'll generally see whether he's a successful manager for Huddersfield. But certainly off the pitch, he puts a lot of weight in being part of the community, being part of the club, and taking on that mantra of being the football club manager. And I think we've seen that. Again, it's a very small sample size. It's quite a short period of time that he's been in the role, with no doubt a lot to do. But the way he spoke to the press, how he's talked around what he wants to do, how he wants to be involved with the club, and his just general persona, his warmth to the media, I think that side we won't have any problems with, and we've never seen any problems with Darren Moore on that side. So yeah, can't really complain from a media and person point of view.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's the timing of it's interesting, because we'd never thought of Neil Warnock as a long-term solution for Huddersfield Town. I would probably say that the right time for him to part company would have been at the end of last season, when he sort of came in. There was that romanticism about helping Dean Hoyle, an old friend of his going back to the 90s, and it felt like he just kept them up. That would have been the right time. But whether there's sort of a reticence from Kevin Nagel's point of view to appoint a new manager at that stage, maybe he felt he was still working out the club or working out English football a little bit. But do you think that this is maybe a missed opportunity from Huddersfield to get a manager in the summer and sort of plan from that point of view, rather than bringing in a manager 10 games into the season?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think if you asked it at the start of the season, obviously you'd have to word it slightly differently to now, you probably get a different response from a lot of Huddersfield fans. I think you've got to kind of break it down a little bit, and if you look at the thought process of the club, Nagel and the powers that be in the summer, it's who have you got available, because Darren Moore wasn't available prior to Warnock's appointment. I think he got fired, if that's the correct word, or parted company 5 days after Warnock was announced. And I think you've got to look at who can we get in who's going to pick up the squad, which is weak for a championship team. Let's be honest. Sure. Need someone to drive it and get the small percentages out of it. You've got a man in there who's done that. Okay, it's different to kind of play 15, 16 games. It is to do a full campaign. But do you kind of try and convince the person who's kept them up already to stay? What does that look like? Does it look like it's till Christmas? Does it look like it's for a full season? Negatives of that are, do you know what I mean? Potentially, you might have to sack this man who's kind of done the miracle. What will that look like? Does he become unsackable? Will it work? If it starts to go south, can you sack Warnock after what he's done for Huddersfield last season? That would be a brave man who does that. So there were massive pros and cons, and I don't think it was a straightforward decision for the club. Do I think they should have got rid of him in the summer, or not got rid of him, but kind of like parted ways in the summer? My opinion in the summer would have been no, purely because I feared for the quality of the squad. The window wasn't great, and I think all my eggs are very much in the basket of the Warnock factor would be the difference maker for this campaign. Which kind of leads maybe onto a question of was it right to kind of part company when we've done it now? And then that's kind of probably a whole another question in its own right. But I think it's hard. I think given where we are now, it'd probably been better if we just let Warnock go in the summer.
Really,
given you'd
rather have had Warnock in charge right now than Darren Moore.
It's a hard task to come into a club that's fighting every game when you've got 2 or 3 days each week to really try and to make a difference. You've got recovery days, you've got preparation days, you've got travel days, and you've not got a lot of time on the field. We've just had an international break, which a lot of our players aren't going away for international duty. That might have given a bit more time. Maybe January, when you've got potentially a few new recruits and you've got to kind of like get ideologies across to a certain few as well, that might have been a potentially better time. But football doesn't necessarily work like that. It's not the fact I'd rather have Neil Warnock in charge from a personnel point of view, but I might. It's more just I think that the timing of giving a new person to do the job and do it well is always difficult in the Championship where you've got Saturday, Tuesday, and not a lot of time on the training field. And that's where I feel for Moore or another manager in that position.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess from the position we're in now, which is Darren Moore has taken charge, what do you think Darren Moore has got to do to start getting some results out of this squad to make sure that you do secure your Championship status for next season?
Yeah, I mean, he's been dealt a slightly harder hand purely because of the 2 results that we got, which were Warnock's last 3 results was a win and a draw. I don't think everyone was too enthralled with not necessarily Warnock, but the way Huddersfield Town were going before those results. And obviously, results drives fans' opinions, doesn't it, massively in this business. So he's been dealt a slightly harder hand. It always looks like he's been passed a winning team, and then we've done a draw and a loss. I think had we have had Warnock, we might still have drawn and lost. So, with regards to what different he needs to do to get recruits, maybe obviously he can't necessarily sign anyone right now, but I think the squad does need depth in a lot of places. Midfield, up front, we haven't signed that striker that we wanted.
I mean, so, just on that, Johnny, just to expand on that point. You say depth is an issue, but it's not as if you've not got many players. I would say that the squad is actually quite big. It's just there's a lot of players who are either well past their best, not quite ready, or not good enough for the level. And I think it's hard to change that in January because you've got to offload players. January is always a difficult time to offload those kind of players. Is there going to be the money to invest in January and maybe make the squad bloated in order to get those 3, 4, 5 players that would make the difference?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think we lost about 24 players in the summer, and we kind of signed 4. We re-signed 2 that we released. So that's kind of a bit of a story in its own right. And I think the players that we recruited in would ordinarily be sat in our B team, which we do operate, similar to kind of a Brentford model. Some of those will probably play minutes on a Championship field this season, but I don't think they'll be looking to play as many minutes as they have done and will have to do between now and January, or certainly looking to start games. I don't go into naming players, but there's players out there which I mean wouldn't be as far up as the team. And because we do operate a BT model, we probably do have a slightly fuller senior age level of players. But certainly from this, there are areas of key positions where it lacks that kind of Championship quality, i.e. experience, games played in the Championship, which I think we do lack. And you make a good point there with the players who have got that are kind of the wrong side of 30, still performing at a credible level to be part of a Huddersfield team in the Championship. But given the rate you're going to have knocks, going to have to miss games, and just to look at last night, missing Hoggy last night was a critical part of that midfield when you've got then great gaps of inexperience, which then causes the problems within the technical side of the game, which we saw, and that's down to just Hoggy's age not want to play every game, and that's where someone who comes in who's got a bit more experience by way of personnel would make a difference, as opposed to a younger player who, is a project, but you've got to have players who split that gap between a young up and coming player and a senior, and that's where we tend to lack a few players in regards to, like I say, that's what I'd look to kind of improve.
Yeah, you mentioned Jonathan Hogg there, Johnny, and I suppose what worries me a little bit about Huddersfield is that I still feel like, in many respects, like leadership and things like that you talked about there's still a reliance on Hogg, and I would say his best year for Huddersfield was probably 2017. If you look at probably the promotion season under Wagner and then the survival in the Premier League, it's 6 years ago that he produced his best form. And is there not a worry that you've not actually been able to replace him and find someone else who's maybe a younger version of Jonathan Hogg?
Well, yeah, it's something that we've discussed for the last 4 windows, I think, on our podcast, is that we need bodies in midfield, i.e. numbers, but we also need a Jonathan Hogg replacement. We've not really found that person. It's a hard task. It's a hard task to replace somebody of that quality and that experience. But it is, like say, Johnny Hogg probably should have had an understudy kind of looking to pick up 56% of the minute snap position last season, even more so this season, and we still don't have that person. We've got people who do bits. And we've got Kasumu, who does struggle for fitness, who can do bits of that game.
I like him, by the way. I
think he's a good player, and I think he could pick up a lot of that. But I still think it's like when we lost O'Brien, to kind of throw a curveball in. We replaced players who did little bits of his game, but it's very hard to replace such a well-rounded player because they are unique, and that's the reason why Hoggy's still been able to play at the level that he is doing at the age he is, because of the quality that he had, which obviously got us to the Premier League and kept us there. But it should have been the top of Huddersfield Town's recruitment list for many years. Is that Jonathan Hogg replacement, and it, as each kind of year or transfer window goes by without that coming into the club directly as one rounded player, it becomes even more and more important, and more and more of a worry.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to bring in Dan Sexton from That Millwall pod shortly, but just one more question, Johnny, for you, which would be, who are the key players that Darren Moore will feel he can build around at Huddersfield?
Well, we got beat 4-1 last night, but I generally say the defence of Huddersfield has got probably the most experienced players. Lee Nichols is a good keeper at level. I think Matt Pearson, Hellick are good players at that level. I think if you get Karoma firing and Sorba Thomas firing, they are also good players at that level. I really think Ben Wiles will add a lot of quality to that midfield. So there is a spine of a team there who've got the championship experience and have done it for Huddersfield previously that he can look to build around. In attack and actually physically put the ball in the back of the net is a real weakness for Huddersfield, and that's has been for a long time, and that's got to be his area to look to improve. But he certainly has got the personnel to ground the team and try and look to keep a zero and build on that. But there are individuals there who've got the experience as I've named, but it's just that kind of central midfield positions and strikers where, that's the game winning part. Those areas run the game. I think that's going to take a little bit of.
Would you recall Jordan Rhodes from Blackpool in January?
I am a huge Rhodes fan, so I'm probably in the higher percentile of Huddersfield Town fans who would say yes to that question. I don't know. I think you've got to be careful that there is a gulf between League One and Championship, but he has scored 5 goals. I think 5 goals in 5 games.
Yeah.
Jordan Rhodes is a finisher. Even last year, he was the best finisher in our club. Probably could have been the best finisher in many Championship clubs. But you've got to play to Jordan Rhodes' strengths. Certainly the way Warnock wanted to play and Fotheringham wanted to play wasn't Jordan Rhodes' strengths. I've not seen Blackpool play, so I'm not sure if they're playing one on top, two on top of what they're
I
doing.
think he has a very quick strike partner when he's been at his best. So they've got a lad called Killian Kouassi who's always running and getting a bit in behind, and it does kind of free up Rhodes to poach a little bit and focus on that. So.
Which makes sense why he's looking at his converting chance. If we play kind of we have previously played very much a one with a lot of pressing coming out of that one and hard work and running, and that isn't Jordan Rhodes' game or strength. It's not through effort in any stretch of imagination. It's just not his strength. So if you play Jordan Rhodes' strengths, I think you still struggle at 33, turning 34. I think to find a better finisher. But what I recall him, I don't know if he would still be what we need. So yeah, it's a tough one. But he's still posing the question, isn't he? You can't do anything more than score a goal a game. So
what it might be is you could recall Jordan Rhodes in January and still bring in a striker. I think that might be the solution for Huddersfield. Listen, John, it's been great to get your insight on Town. Great stuff on the Annie Takes That Chance podcast. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully catch up with you soon, mate.
Cheers. No, thank you very much.
Delighted to introduce our next guest, which is Dan Sexton from That Millwall Podcast. Good afternoon to you, Dan. How are you, mate?
Good afternoon. I'm still absolutely delighted with last night. I still haven't actually gone. Well, I'm not home. I'm actually staying at families because of the train strikes and stuff. But when you get 3 points like you did last night, I don't really care how long the journey to and from takes.
Yeah, well, glad you were able to sort yourself out. It's a bit of a nightmare with public transport at the moment, isn't it? I guess I wanted to ask you about what's the mood in the Millwall fan base like at the moment, Dan? Because it feels like Gary Rowett's. It feels like there's kind of undertones of pressure on Gary Rowett that whenever there's a defeat, even if the team isn't in horrendous form or anything, there's always that bit of pressure on, and there's this feeling of Rowett's a bit conservative, and you don't get that kind of up and atom football that I suppose Millwall as a club would associate itself with. And yet you've got a manager in Gary Rowett who's delivered consistent top half football in each of his 4 seasons in charge. You're currently in the top half again. There's such a reliable solidity for much of the time at Millwall. So I suppose from an outside perspective, can you just kind of break down the feelings towards Gary Rowett and your own point of view on it as well?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of stems back from, obviously, if you look at how badly it went off our form at the end of last season. I mean, I think after last night, we're still at 6 wins in 20 games, which isn't a fantastic record overall. It's about 6 in 20. So, and that goes back to March. So kind of obviously the end of last season, I think obviously that's still quite fresh in people's minds and stuff. And as you kind of mentioned there, it is the style of football. You know, we've been used to not watching great football under Rowett, but still winning games. The difference is where we've usually been so good defensively over the last few years. Defensively this season, we look a bit, well, we've obviously other than last night, but when we concede, we end up conceding like 2 or 3 goals as we have done. On a number of occasions.
What do you think's behind? Sorry to interrupt there, Dan. What do you think's behind the defensive issues for this season?
I think we just needed a centre half, to be honest. It just felt like Rowett wants to play last season he played 4-2-3-1 for most of the season. At times going to a 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, however you want to say it. And this season he started off with that, and we've got 3 players there. So our usual centre-halves, the stalwarts that everyone knows have been Jake Cooper, Sean Hutchinson and Murray Wallace. But Hutchinson's very injury-prone and he's like 32 now. So even when he gets an injury, you've got to question like what level he's going to be able to get back to when he's back from his injury. And then you've got Murray Wallace, who he was a couple of seasons ago, one-off player of the season, but sadly he's just struggling to kind of get any kind of form going at the minute. I don't think it helps the fact he chops and changes kind of between left back, left wing back and centre back quite a lot. Cooper's fine. I mean, on the ball, he's not the greatest, but he's at the level, he's a really, really good defender. And then we've had Ryan Leonard playing there so far, usually centre mid, but he's been playing centre half this season. If I had to do my player of the season,
in a back 3 rather than a back 4.
Yeah. He's been playing like a right centre half. But if I had to do my player of the season vote now, I'd probably be voting for Ryan Leonard, to be completely honest. He's been superb so far. And then Wes Harding, who signed from Rotherham, and he played last night, and he was my man of the match last night. So I don't know, maybe it's just a little bit of tinkering, try and get there. We usually start off quite slow, but I think it's just like the way we've been playing, like conceding like 4 goals to what was Reading's like youth team, effectively conceding 3 goals at home to Leeds, which would like never have happened under Neil Harris or Kenny Jackett, managers like that when they're in charge of Millwall, conceding 3 to Swansea, going up to Norwich, conceding 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if I look at Gary Rowett's best teams, it probably has been with a 4-2-3-1. My team, Birmingham, improved instantly when he first took charge, and he went to 4-2-3-1 and made us a top 10 side. And then probably, I think, got to the playoffs with Derby with a 4-2-3-1, and last season as well. Is there part of you that's a little bit disappointed that he's gone back to the back 5? And you probably would say with the makeup of Rowett's sides, it does feel a bit more like a back 5 than a back 3, I guess.
Yeah, that's a completely fair statement to make there. Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. Obviously, well, last season he played 3-5 at the back for like the first 10 games, and we were rubbish. And we was like, you've all got to change it. And then we played 4, and that was when our season kind of sparked into life last season. And then there was a few games towards the end where he changed back to a back 5 due to personnel and tactical reasons and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, from a Millwall perspective, especially when we play at home, I'd like to see us play 4 at the back, get another body up front. Millwall's obviously known for having that atmosphere at the Den, which has become a bit of a soft place more recently, a bit easier for away teams to come and get results, want to play in your face. When we've got another body at the back of the team rather than towards the front of the team, it's harder to kind of play that way.
Yeah, for sure. Do you see any chance that Gary Rowett maybe takes the handbrake off a little bit and moves Millwall towards a more aggressive sort of front foot direction? Or do you feel like, considering the way that you've played and got some results over the last 4 years, it's pretty much going to be the same template?
Yeah, I don't think if it's changed like much over 4 years. I don't see it changing too much now. But, you know, I mean, football, at the end of the day, football is a results business. It's a results-driven game. I mean, as I said, we haven't watched great football over the last 4 years when he's been in. But if we're winning games, then ultimately I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose you were able to win the ball quite high up a few times at Plymouth Argyle, and that was kind of how some of the goals came from, I guess. Is there some encouragement to take from that performance?
Yeah, second half. In first half, I thought was a bit of a rubbish game. I thought we were definitely the second best in the first half. Second half was probably the best 45 minutes I've probably seen Millwall play as a 45 this season, because we had that pressing, and then when we got the ball, we actually tried to pass and move a little bit rather than just lump it forwards like we end up usually doing. So, yeah, in terms of the second half, I want to see more of that kind of performance. And obviously got the 2 goals and kept a clean sheet. And obviously, I know Fleming was obviously one of the best players I was, as far as going saying, in the league last season, especially with his goals and contribution from midfield. Hopefully now he got one against Rotherham and failed to kind of kick on in the next one. But hopefully now he can try and get a bit of momentum going. Once he got his first goal last season, he was flying. So hopefully...
Why do you think he has lost some momentum this season, Dan?
Why do I think Fleming's lost some momentum? I think his head got turned by transfer. He had a lot of interest from Burnley in the summer, bids of like up to...
I heard, was it 14 million or something that Burnley...
I think it was about 12 million.
12 million. I mean, now you'd probably say, wish we could have 12 million pounds in the bank for Zian Fleming. Do you think that the club maybe missed an opportunity in not cashing in at that stage when his value was that high?
Possibly. I mean, I always said at the start of summer my asking price for him was 15 million, so I didn't really want the club to buckle too much. I mean, obviously, I know it's quite a big number when it's someone we only paid 1.7 million for the season before. But Burnley, they're in the Premier League, they have the money to spend. So and obviously, you know, you don't get many goals, many midfielders that kind of get 14, 15 goals a season. So I feel like that would have happened. But obviously, at the time of the Burnley we were sending bids in our way, that was the time obviously John Berylson sadly passed away, so I feel like that move kind of hit the buffers when that happened, as Burnley wanted to be respectful and then moved on to other targets.
Right, okay, yeah. You can sort of understand that in one way, but I guess it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity, because I don't think his value is going to be 12 million this January. How important do you think, Dan, Billy Mitchell is going to be to Millwall's attempts to get into the playoff mix this season?
Oh, he's been out of the team in the last few games. We've been we've been playing 5-2-3, and Rowett's been playing Casper De Nore, new signing in midfield, who's looked really good so far. He's been playing him, and he played him and God, I can't remember who it was last night. Alan Campbell from Luton, who he signed on loan on Declan Day.
Yeah, that's a good signing actually, because Alan Campbell is a really energetic, aggressive midfielder. He's
still looking like he's getting up to speed a little bit. I don't think he played too much football in pre-season, but we've seen like a little glimpses and stuff. But he looks like he's a bit knackered usually after kind of 60 minutes. So, and in a way, I almost don't blame him, because where we play a two-man midfield, our midfield have to do a lot of running, and if you're up against 3 or sometimes even 4 players in there, then you run the risk then of getting overrun. So it's not surprising. And obviously I've got to mention Jules Saville as well. He came 3rd in our Player of the Season vote, struggling to get a game, and then comes off the bench and puts one in the top corner in the last minute. So I think Billy Mitchell has slipped down the pecking order a little bit in terms of midfielders. He's someone who kind of splits opinion among the fan base. I don't mind him, but I know there's a lot of Millwall fans out there that don't like him. So he's still only young. That's the good thing. And maybe playing with someone like Campbell, who's got that promotion under his belt, and De Nore, who's got Champions League experience, hopefully that can improve him as a player.
Yeah, hopefully so. But yeah, good to see Millwall bouncing back with a win on Tuesday night, Dan, and hopefully you can kick on from here, mate. Yeah,
that would be the absolute plan. I mean, as I said, last season, 10 games in, that was kind of when we got going, and we was in the league's so tight, it's still early days. So if you can get a couple of results together, you end up like near the top, and then you just see where the season takes you after that. Hopefully you snowball a little bit and don't do what we did, which was we didn't really play for the first 10 games last season, didn't really play for the last 10 games either. It'd be nice if we could play consistently for a full 46. So
yeah, well, that's the aim. Listen, Dan, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Keep up the great work on That Millwall Podcast, and hopefully catch up with you later in the season, buddy.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, mate. Cheers.
Cheers, fella. I'm delighted to bring in my next guest, which is Chris Hall from Albion Analysis. Good evening, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, mate. How's things?
Yeah, really well, thanks. Just wanted to ask you about West Brom's 4-0 victory over Preston North End, of course, followed up by the win over Sheffield Wednesday in midweek as well.
Why, Gab, are you sweating about Friday?
I'm very nervous.
This feels like a scouting trip for you, but there you go.
Absolutely. If you could just reveal your practical secret.
You'd be straight on the blower to Eustace after this.
Absolutely, yeah. He's texted me this morning, which is why I want to get you on. Just talk to us about the last John Swift. Let's start with him, because he was outstanding, wasn't he, in that 4-0 win over Preston North End, and he seems to be able to thread a ball through the eye of a needle, and you seem to be getting the best out of him at the moment.
I mean, first of all, who wasn't outstanding in that 4-0 win over Preston? Sure. It was probably the most complete performance I've seen from an Albion team in years, quite literally in years. But yeah, Swifty has just been outstanding this season. I mean, you say about the Preston game, his finish last night for the only goal of the game was a tremendous finish, and that's one of the areas where probably we'd been critical of him up to this point. Or last season, I should say. His chance creation had him as one of the best number 10s in the division, but he simply wasn't adding enough goals to what he was doing. He hadn't scored a set play either for us. I mean, he was creating chances from them, but he wasn't scoring directly from them. And he's just added goals to his game. He's got 5 already this season, which is absolutely fantastic. And they're really good finishes as well, because the vast majority of his goals last season were penalties. He didn't score many from open play. He's scoring open play goals now. He whipped a free kick in against Watford, although quite what postcode Daniel Bachmann was heading off to try and save it, I'm not entirely sure. But nonetheless, he's. There wasn't a lot wrong with his game last season, but probably the one thing that was wrong with it was that he wasn't putting the ball in the onion bag anywhere enough. And he's changed that this season, and wow, what a championship player he is. It's always one of those things. You never know whether a player is capable of stepping up to the Premier League, because we all know, it's such an enormous leap. But there's not a doubt in my mind that as a championship footballer, he's got to be one of the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess before the season, Chris, West Brom were probably the team that I found hardest to call, because I felt like we could very easily be talking about a team that finished in the top two because of how good Carlos Corberán is, and we could have very easily be talking about a team that finishes in the bottom three because of how awfully run the club is. I suppose that the fate for West Brom is likely to be somewhere in the middle. Which sort of side of the spectrum do you think you're moving towards at the moment?
No, well, I mean, we're moving towards at the moment is the top end. I mean, we're fifth. So, I mean, obviously, we're speaking on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. There's still games to be played. So I think we could drop as far as seventh. So there's only two teams that can catch us in tonight's games. So, nonetheless, worst case scenario, we finish the week on the cusp of the playoffs. Best case scenario, we finish it in them. So we're trending in the right direction, Gab. I think the big thing that we've seen over the last few games is Pete and I on Albion Analysis spoke after the three consecutive draws with Millwall, Watford and Bristol City and said, actually, we're playing better in these games that we're drawing than we were when we were beating Swansea and Middlesbrough earlier in the season. Those were wins that weren't sustainable. We scored practically every shot we hit in those games. We lost the XG battle in both of them. That we were never going to continue winning games in that fashion. And I think the tipping point for us was Huddersfield at home, which we lost in the last minute with just some crazy decision making and a poor goalkeeping from Alex Palmer, which is not something you can say often. But Corberán came out afterwards and said, we've conceded 2 goals in every game except for Leeds away, and that's not sustainable. And you aren't going to get where you want to go conceding 2 every week. Since that game, we've kept 4 clean sheets in 5. You can see where the focus was.
There's more. Sorry, just to jump in on that as well, Chris. What stands out to me is there's some aerial presence in the defence. Whereas last season, I remember you having, I think Dara O'Shea was at times your most aerially dominant defender, and listen, Dara's a battler, but it feels like you've got some physicality and a real presence in your defence at the moment.
I mean, I know what you're saying, Gab, but let's not forget. Until Dara O'Shea got injured, we went. I think it was 10 games without conceding a goal from open play at home. So let's not decry what Dara did in that defence last season.
Sorry, that wasn't the intention. I think just in terms of having sort of Cedric Kipre at the back, for example, and the impact that he can make.
Yeah, I don't think it's aerially that Kipre makes a big difference. I mean, where we've looked better aerially in the last couple of games is Carl Bartley has been absolutely outstanding coming back into that defence. Where Kipre makes a difference is he's got this pace. I mean, he goes into everything 110%, sometimes to his detriment because he makes some big mistakes doing it. I mean, he was fortunate to not get a penalty given against him at Leeds, even though he didn't make contact with the lad. It wasn't a penalty, but nonetheless, 9 times out of 10, you kick your leg out like that, and probably a referee gives a penalty. But he's got this dynamism to his game. He's got the way he drives out of defence. He's just something very different to what you usually see in a centre half at this level. I mean, let's be honest. If Kipre had any real level of consistency to him, he wouldn't be playing in the Championship, because he's got all the attributes to play in the Premier League. He's quick. He's powerful. He's strong. He's committed in the challenge. As you say, he's tall, even though he isn't the greatest in the air. We look so much more comfortable with Bartley as the central one of those 3, because he just doesn't lose headers, Carl Bartley. But if Kipre could cut out the mistakes, and they're generally one big mistake a game. It's normally one crazy misplaced pass. He'd be playing for Premier League football because everything else is there for him, but he's just got this big error in him, and it's not like it is with some players once every 4 or 5 weeks. It it is one sort of like crazy moment per game with Kit Pray. But the other 89 minutes are fantastic out of him. And you know,
you take that rate, wouldn't you? 89 out of they should rewrite the Meatloaf song, 89 out of 98 pounds.
Well, I mean, he still should come with a health warning though as well. I mean, there is that factor in it. But there you go.
Yeah. I wanted to we can't talk about West Brom, Chris, without talking about OK Yakuslu, because he's just such an intelligent operator to my eyes, Chris. He seems to just always know where to be on the pitch. He seems to be energetic without making it look like hard work, and he just seems to have that real sort of canny intelligence to his game that I absolutely love. Just talk to me about how good his partnership with Alex Mowat has been.
Well, I mean, it hasn't been a partnership with Alex Mowat through most of the season. It's only been the last 3 games. Jason Malumbi's partnered him for much of the season. But I mean, to be honest, I'd rather talk about those 3 as a collective, Gab, because we're rotating now. 2 out of the 3 play: Malumbi, Yukoslu, and Mowat. Mowat started the season on the outside looking in. He's now become the one that's basically undroppable. For 3 games now, he's been man of the match by a country mile. The guy is just running games from the middle of the park, Alex Mowat. Mowat, last time he was in an Albion shirt, he played through much of the season with a hernia problem. He played through the pain barrier and it showed, and he was poor. What we're seeing now is a fully fit Alex Mowat, and it really is a sight to behold. He is bossing games. He's got quality on the ball, but he's got this aggression and bite about his play as well. And then you put someone like Yukoslu alongside him, who's got the height, who wins those aerial duels, who's a real Rolls Royce of a player, very calm, shrugs people off like they're made of tissue paper. And then you've got Jason Malumbi, who is just energy personified. We've got a really lovely blend in there, and Mowat brings goals which the other 2 really, they don't to the same extent. Malumbi, I don't think Malumbi's ever scored a goal for us from more than about 3 yards. He seems to be that guy, because he's so committed, who normally bundles the ball over the line in a goalmouth scramble. And Yukoslu's popped up with a couple. I think he scored a couple against Preston. I can't remember him scoring any others for us last season, but Mowat is the one who adds goals. So you've got the other 2 who are defensive solidity, and Mowat's just this wonderful box to box player. We've got a nice blend in a few areas, to be honest, Gab. At the moment, it's just our big problem at the minute is we haven't got a true 9. Brandon Thomas Asante is manfully doing his best in that position, but unfortunately, he's struggling a little bit at the moment. He's not a born 9, and Albion fans have got a lot of sympathy for him, because he's being asked to do a job that, you know, he was originally a winger. He also came from League 2. He's not really a lone striker. He doesn't really hold the ball up. He had a tough night last night against
Chris. Is this somewhere? I totally take your point how not having a true number 9 is a real issue. But I also think that the best coaches, when they're presented with problems, they have that mentality of almost being a little bit excited about it because it gives them an opportunity to find new solutions. I think the best managers in the world have that, to be honest. And what I really love about Carlos Corberán is that he's been able to find this sort of front 3 with Jed Wallace, John Swift and Brandon Thomas Asante. And he seems to have made it work without necessarily having that out and out centre forward. So even if, yes, absolutely, in an ideal world, if you can get a loan in January or bring in a complete centre forward, that would be ideal. But I also have some faith in Carlos Corberán just to find solutions from somewhere, because that's what he seems to be so good at.
Well, to be honest, we shouldn't need a loan in January, Gab, because the reason we've got a problem at the moment is Maja got injured just as he got fully fit for us, and he'll be back around November, and then DK should hopefully be back around the new year. So
he's got a big fitness. He seems to have struggled with injuries.
I would suggest it's bad luck, Gab. If you keep getting the same injury over and over again, it's a fitness issue. If you just get different injuries, it's just bad luck. And there's no history of Daryl DK having injuries prior to this in his career. I just think he's had a lot of bad luck. But I mean, you're right about the forward line. The one you missed off, you didn't mention, was Grady Diangana, who's been unbelievable in the last couple of games. And what it's given Corberan the opportunity to do is rotate things around. So we started last night with Swift and Wallace either side of Brandon Thomas Asante, but then we started against Preston with Swift and Diangana and Wallace as the 9, and we started against Millwall with Diangana and Sarmiento, who himself is out for 4 weeks now, alongside either side of Brandon Thomas Asante. So when we've got those players available, obviously we're going to be denied Sarmiento for a few weeks. When we've got those players available, you've got Swift, Wallace, Diangana, Brandon Thomas Asante, and Jeremy Sarmiento. Only 3 of them are going to play any time, and you can just rotate those 5 around the different positions, and it works really, really well. But like I say, none of them are truly a 9. I think they'd all probably rather play in those slightly wider areas. And when Major and DK are back, it affords us. We look strong when everyone's back, but as you know, a championship season is rigorous, and the time, as you've just found out with Siriki Dembele being missing for 6 weeks, the times when you can call upon all of your best players all of the time are few and far between.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of Siriki Dembele, how are you feeling for Friday night? Feeling confident? Or?
Based on our last few visits there, no, absolutely not. There's some of our worst performances that we've turned in the last couple of visits to St Andrews. I think we got beat by a Lyle Taylor penalty in a game where I don't think we even had a shot, and then you had the David Button show last season. So no, I'm not particularly, just because we've got such a bad record there. But in terms of how we're playing at the moment, I do feel good, but you're a different proposition this season. I think you've been largely propped up by loans in previous seasons, but you look, whether it's Mayoshi, whether it's Dembele, whether obviously you have got Stansfield up front, who is a loan, but I think you've got more. I think you've got more offensive weapons than a Birmingham side in the Championship I can remember for quite a while, because whilst you've caused us a lot of problems in the past, I would suggest your threat has been largely a little bit one-dimensional, and I don't think
Duke crosses into Djukovic and things like that. Yeah, no, hopefully, I think it's going to be a really exciting game. 2 very well-coached teams. May the best team win.
As long as it's us.
Great to have you on, Chris, and hopefully speak to you soon.
My pleasure, mate. Anytime.
Cheers. Delighted to introduce my next guest, which is Nathaniel Whitto from the excellent Hull and Back podcast. Thanks for waiting, Nathaniel. We really do appreciate your time. Just talk to us about how you're feeling as a Hull fan right now after that 3-0 loss at Ipswich.
Well, firstly, thanks for the kind comments. It's always a pleasure coming on. And at the moment, it's really good to be a Hull City fan. I mean, I know we got sort of battered by Ipswich last night, 3-0. Our worst performance and result of the season, perhaps, other than the Doncaster League Cup game. But that's weeks ago now. Fortunately for us and the rest of the Championship, there's only one Ipswich, so we don't have to play them every week. And I know you just had a Millwall fan on there. That's our next game, so looking forward to that. But so far, just dropped out of the playoffs, but I predicted 11th, and at the moment we're 8th, and we're, I think, just goal difference off 4th. So we're in a very good position, playing fairly well.
Why did you say 11th, actually, Nathaniel? Because I reckon that was a bit conservative.
Yeah, well, I think you were a bit optimistic. We're going to talk about this the whole season. Sure. You said 6th for us.
You did say 6th. I'm sticking with that as well.
Happily take that. I mean, Rossini is very young, and we've seen it with Michael Carrick at Middlesbrough this season. He was a young manager, came in, did really well, but sometimes that can peter out a little bit as well. It seems we are better than last season generally, but I don't want to be too optimistic and get disappointed, because that's what I did last year. I think I actually predicted we'd finish 11th last year as well, but my hopes were higher because of the new ownership and the new money coming in. I think it's just because there's teams that with more experience, and there's teams that have come down from the Premier League or up from League One, clearly, like Ipswich, who just perhaps are more cohesive. I think another year under Vecina, because he's only had 52 games as an actual manager now, so he's very young. But it's still a very exciting time. Top 10 would be good, but if we're not at our best, which I don't think we are, breaking teams down at home has certainly been the issue so far. If we finally find a way to do that, the away form, except Ipswich last night, has been really good. So I think I might predict, if we're asking predictions now that we're allowed to look at the table after 10 games, maybe where we are.
It was banned for the first 10 games.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it should be. I think where we are 8th, perhaps, that would be reasonable. But the amount of points difference between 6th and like 11th sometimes can be like 2 or 3.
Sure.
And maybe we just need to start being more ruthless. But we've got good players, we can do it. But anything is possible. I'm a Hull fan, so I know that you can be 8th in January and finish rock bottom of the league. So that's what we did a few years ago.
Can't quite see that happening this
no.
So I wanted to. You mentioned there that breaking teams down at home has been mainly the issue for Hull. I know that you build up with a sort of 3 at the back shape because Louis Coyle pushes right up from right back, and I'm just wondering whether maybe does that waste a few defenders? Would it be better to build up with almost 2 centre backs and get another full back sort of further forward, or do you feel like you need the balance of having the 3 there?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have been playing sometimes with a sort of asymmetrical system. You said we've seen it. Coyle pushes up. It's more like he becomes the 3rd centre back, I'd say. And we've had Lakilo or Philogene as a wing back, and then the other winger, but it depends on who's playing. I think that playing out from the back, we are so much better than we were in the first game I watched under Vecina against Cardiff. We still won that game, but how we did, we could have conceded 10 from giving out the ball. And then there was a lot of criticism, some jeers at a difficult point where we gave the ball to Plymouth twice in about a few minutes. And so there is criticism over how we play. It's more just about the specific times when we give the ball away. The system does work. And against Plymouth, we got through them easily at times, many times, and we just weren't good enough when we got to the final third. So I think, we've improved so much. At the moment, honestly, it's not the system, it's just being ruthless up front. The amount of opportunities we had with, sort of opportunities to create chances from crossing, and just the final ball was bad. Poor Ruben Vinagre probably still wasn't 100% fit, had about 10 opportunities to go at his, defender and beat him, and only got 1 cross in. So I think we just need to work on that. It's the same as last year. We've drawn so many games, especially at home. 2 home defeats, but I think like 12 from 20, something like that. The majority. And it's the same as last season. We sort of start poorly, perhaps go a goal behind, especially against 10 men. Or we struggle to break down 10 men. And then we have a good push at the end, perhaps when we've worn the other team out with the possession. But yeah, we just need to start being ruthless. And you'd think with the players we've got and that we've signed up front, we will manage to do that. But the same as last year, we had a few home draws under Vecina, then we beat QPR, and then we went on a good run. So I think we just need to do that again, just finally get a bit of luck, get that first win, and then I think we will, carry on. Even if the away form dips, we can have a good year.
So Benjamin Tete, I think I'm right in saying, left in the summer. Do you think that that's had any bearing on some of those issues where maybe sometimes you'd like to have that reference point, someone who's strong, who's got a great, 6'4", ball can stick to him, brings a bit of quality as well. Do you think that's something that you're missing at the moment?
Well, Tete is a kind of strange one because we've also loaned out Oscar Estepinian to Metz in France. So like us last year, the 2 games where Metz fans will appreciate Tete and Oscar up front when either of them are both fit, which won't happen very regularly. They'll love that. At the moment, sort of, because we used to have Jackson Irvine as a sort of wide winger, target man, even though he was a centre mid. And we had Tete last year on the wing sometimes, and now we're playing Delap on the wing. So I think actually Delap is much better than Tete, and Tete was a good player, but I don't really think he was fit enough to, play the system and play in England. So I think Delap sort of replaced that.
More physical than Delap.
I wouldn't say. I mean, perhaps because he was 6'4", but I think Delap has really impressed me coming on and just ripping defenders to shreds. Really, he's really quick and strong, holds the ball up. I thought he'd be more of a technical finisher coming from Man City, but actually he's a lot more like Rory Delap. He would have fit into his dad's sort of old Stoke team with the sort of way he plays. To be honest. Sure. I'd be very impressed, and it was a shame he hadn't played the last few games, but he did well against Ipswich, created a few chances. So at times, Connolly has gone down injured in almost every game and then got back up again, which is fortunate, because if he does get injured, we've only got Delap as a striker. I think loaning out Oscar for the moment has been okay, but we might come to rue that if Connolly does get an injury, which with his record is fairly likely.
Yeah, he gets knocked down, but he gets up again. Talk to me about Jean-Michel Seri, Nathaniel. How important do you think he's going to be to your chances of pushing for the playoffs?
Well, he's absolutely crucial. I was just thinking of an answer to this question because I might surprise a few people again. He is really great. However, because he's so good, and I think Rossini puts so much emphasis on him, I was just thinking, I was lucky enough to go to the press conference when we signed about 10 players.
Nice one.
Last summer.
Passes.
Yeah. So it wasn't like that really. I didn't get to ask any questions, but Shotarov Valadze, our manager then, was complaining that Seri was late to the press conference because he's just so relaxed and drives so slowly, like James May on Top Gear or something. And it's like that. The last two games we've almost conceded because even though he's very good on the ball, at the back, linking the defence to the attack with playing out from the goalkeeper, sometimes he just gets too relaxed. It's like he doesn't have any adrenaline or anything like that. And
it's
so
a strength and a weakness almost. It's like a double-edged sword that can kind of
once a game or once every 2 games. It's like that West Brom fan talking about Cedric Kipre. He does tend to do a mistake every game.
I could see you nodding along to that in a recognition.
The one against Stoke, he gave the ball away when we were 2-0 up in the last 10 seconds of the half. Allsop had to make a great save from the free kick Seri gave away on the edge of the box. And then Connolly and Seri had a bit of a tiff afterwards. And Rossini sort of said that was positive, that they want the players to sort of, not want to make mistakes like that. And then Seri tried to clear the ball against a Plymouth player. It hit him and almost went in past Allsop against Plymouth. So there's been 2 chances in the last 3 games where it's been really dicey at the back. So he is very important. But I just think, sometimes the whole team especially just needs to know when to give to boot it up the pitch and when to be brave. And I think the thing is, Rossini's talking about being brave, playing out from the back. They need to be braver up front as well. I think that's where they're lacking the chaos, the ruthlessness that you need to break these teams down at home, especially.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can find those extra gears, Nathaniel. Before I bring in Ben Rowley, because I do want to bring him on Stoke City, I've just got a final question. Is there anyone at Hull this season that's kind of surprised you about how good they've been that maybe you weren't anticipating before the season?
I guess Louis Coyle slightly. I already said that Delap was better than I thought because, and also, there's a fair few. The whole sort of thing, we used to have a very clear sort of message that we buy young players and sell them on. That only actually happened once with Bowen. Everyone else we lost for free, but that was the idea. At the moment under Rossini, it seems that we sign players that are kind of young but have had difficult experiences elsewhere. Twine was injured, Vinagre's been out. Connolly was hated by Middlesbrough fans. Allsop didn't really have a very good time at Cardiff and rehabilitate them. So players like that, but I guess the main one, Coyle, replacing Christie, who was the best right back in the league for some of the season last year. He's come in and he's the captain and he never puts a foot wrong. Gets elbowed in the head every game and always ends up being bloody at the end of the match. So yeah, that's just what you want to see, a local boy doing his best. And just going to mention quickly his younger brother, because they're a sporting family. Rocco Coyle was on the bench, and apparently he's going to be the best of all the Coyle brothers who have been famous sporting people. So good luck to him as well.
Yeah, hopefully he can spring into action. Yeah, brilliant stuff, Nathaniel. Love your stuff on the Hull and Back podcast, and hopefully catch up with you soon, mate.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. So delighted to welcome Ben Rowley, who's a Stoke City podcaster. Good evening, Ben. How are you, mate?
Oh, after last night, honestly, I've just about calmed down. I've never been so furious at a football game in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I for any Stoke fan watching, that must have been up there with the worst refereeing displays we've had. Not necessarily in terms of really bad decisions that definitely influenced the outcome of the game, but oh my goodness, I've never sworn so much at a football game.
Right. I mean, I always feel reluctant to complain about referees in the EFL because I absolutely despise VAR and I'd hate it to come into the EFL. So I almost think I would rather have bad refereeing if it was a straight choice between that or VAR. But I understand some people will probably think differently about that. I guess on to Stoke City as a whole. It's been a bit of an up and down season so far, I think it's fair to say. You've obviously lost 1-0 to Southampton last time out, but managed to come back from 2-0 down at Bristol City the previous Saturday to win 3-2. But overall, I think it's fair to say it hasn't been the best run of form. So, yeah, how are you feeling at the moment as a Stokey?
I think I told you during the week that my optimism is very fragile at the moment. It's signing 18 players in the summer. I think even you adjusted your expectations of Stoke and thought, wow, okay, they've changed the way they do things. They're having a go. They seem to have changed the model off the pitch. And you'd hope for some sort of improvement or at least a break from the, seemingly eternal pessimism around the club. And yet we are still Stoke City at its core. And we cannot shake anywhere above 16th place. The only truly good performance that we've had this season is against Rotherham. And I think, most teams will have a good game against Rotherham, unfortunately, this season. The rest have been battling at best and dreadful at worst. As you said, the Bristol City comeback was, exceptional really for 2-0 down, and the manner in which we conceded as well was really disappointing. And the way that we came back into it, showed a lot of character there. But just whether it be tactically poor, whether it be application of the manager's instructions being poor, whether it be a monumental amount of injuries once again, and it's inexplicable that we have, I think it's 10 players out injured at the moment.
You seem to have always had this problem at Stoke for the last 5 years or so.
And it's a microcosm of, we change every year. We are a new Stoke City pretty much every year. They're so more than any other. And yet the more things change, the more we stay the same. We are still an injury-ridden, underachieving club. Yeah. We're just hopeless. We just ruin everyone's accumulators and spoil weekends for Stoke fans across the country.
Yeah, I suppose there's two schools of thought on it at the moment. One school of thought would be Alex Neil's had the best part of 12 months to get things right now. I imagine the form that you've had under his guidance, certainly comfortably bottom half form, not far, probably near, not a million miles off relegation form, I would suggest, over his tenure. And that's with a summer. Don't think you spent an awful lot in January, but certainly a summer where you've brought in 10 to 15 players and spent a significant 8-figure fee, we'll call it, combined for all those signings. And there hasn't been an obvious improvement this season. On the other hand, I suppose the other school of thought would be, given the volume of players brought in, and the fact that the club has backed Alex Neil, surely he then deserves some time to sort of mould this team into a more coherent unit. I suppose those are two different schools of thought. There's probably a spectrum between them. Where do you lie, Ben, on that spectrum?
I'm sitting on the fence, smack bang in the middle, because like you, I can completely see both sides. We have been genuinely quite unfortunate. Andre Vidagel is our top goal scorer with 4 goals. He's been out injured for I think 5 games now of the 10. So that is genuinely, truly annoying. Ryan May we signed, I think, for a fee of up to like 5 million quid. He's been injured for pretty much every game this season. Wouter Berg has been injured, who we signed a lot of money for. We currently have 2 fit defenders. One of them was playing in League 2 last season. The other is Luke McNally, who's on loan. It's absolutely crazy, the injury situation. And then, like I say, refereeing displays last night really did not help us. The way that we've been conceding goals, it's not necessarily been a poor performance, it's just been lapses in concentration. So how much you think
the signs in the performances are there then?
I think they can be. This is the thing. We are still very inconsistent in our performances. Neil is still trying to find what team is best. Of course, that's very difficult when you're forced to chop and change all the time, blood in new players. But at the same time, part of me thinks that he's got to be doing better than this. We've got to be doing better than looking at the table and thinking, we won against Bristol City and we managed to reach up to 16th. And we were quite pleased with that. And you step back and think, that is outrageous on anyone's scale. I think the fact that we were happy with climbing up to that is, really poor. So he's not helping himself in the way that he's, not being able to get a tune out of Stoke really, other than March last season, which was genuinely some of the best football I've seen Stoke play. But otherwise, it's been dour. It's been, as bad as we've seen in the Championship, from my point of view. The board won't sack him, regardless of what we think, because they've invested a lot in him. They've been chasing Alex Neil for a long time, and they very much see this as a process. And that's fair enough, because, you look at, Notts Forest last season, Cardiff last season, all signed a lot of players. Both teams looking like they're coming good now after some, patience and blooding in, and, they are getting there. But at the same time, Alex Neil's supposed to be better than this. I don't see some of the advantages of having him in charge that we were supposed to be getting. The tactical nous, the fitness and the energy, the front foot football.
Ben, in terms of tactical nous, he showed the ability to switch the back 3 to combat Watford's front 3 on the 3rd week of the season. So he's shown the ability to adapt to individual matches, something that maybe he's been criticised for not having at different times in his career.
Possibly. There's 2 main concerns I've got with him. One, he still can't break down a low block, pretty much. Like I say, other than Rotherham.
Does the main make a difference to that, Ben?
Don't get me wrong. He's only just been able to get the options for that. He said he signed Sead Haksabanovic for that purpose. Of being able to break down. We've been able to beat some good opposition in our time and lose to really poor ones.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to see that trend reversed. But at the same time, the amount of substitutions that Alex Neil has made before halftime this season, most fans complain, I'm sure, about their managers never make a change before halftime. He's not brave enough. It's all well and good doing it once or twice in the season, but I'd argue he's done it for over half the games this season, and it shows.
Do you know what?
He's not setting up his team correctly
on that though, Ben, and sort of say I actually quite like that the manager gives his team the biggest window to get things right. If he feels like he didn't get the starting 11 right, sometimes it takes a bit of honesty to say, do you know what, this isn't working, and actually we're going to change it and try and get something out. And I kind of admire that, actually.
I as I said, if it was a couple of games, I would as well. But the fact that he's done it so often, and he's often, starting the same players, subbing them off again, and bringing people like Wesley on, and it's just Route 1 football when he comes on. it's almost like he's tried his plan for half an hour. We're 2-0 down. Oh, well, I better chuck Wesley on and see what he can do. That's genuinely been the tactic for quite a few games this season. And that's disappointing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As I said, I have sympathy with him. He needs, time to be able to get to know these players, particularly when they're fit. But, losing games in the manner that we have sometimes has been really frustrating.
What's your sort of benchmark for what's acceptable for Stoke City this season, Ben? Because I think when we spoke, it was a little bit harder to understand targets because we didn't quite know the calibre of player that Stoke were going to try and bring in. And I would suggest maybe it's been even a little bit more... extravagant than possibly we were even expecting, even though we were both expecting a high quantity of players to come in. Do you think 16th with some signs of progress is enough? Is a top half finish minimum given the quality that you've brought in on paper? Is it dependent a little bit on context, on things like injuries and availability? Where are you sitting on all that?
Like I say, if it was Alex Neil's job, I think, it would have to be, for him to go, we'd have to be in a relegation battle all season. And as poor as we can be, we will win enough games so that we're clear of that, I'm quite sure. There are poorer teams in this division, luckily. Yeah. In terms of fans being happy, they will want progress. And rightly so, I think. We are due some. I would argue top half would be enough for the fans to give Neil a chance for next season. If not, if we finish bottom half again, Neil will still be here. I've got no doubt about that. But it'll be a very hostile or a very impatient start to next season. Another season in the bottom half when we spent so much money, when we've been promised so much, when the expectation on us, although dipping, is still relatively high from opposition fans. It's so frustrating, and you do wonder whether someone could get more out of the group of players that we've got. But as I say, it's a long season, long way to go. Time to gel has been called for, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny, I think, with Ben, with those seasons where you're pretty confident you're not going to go down, but you're not going to get promoted, because I think we sort of set sometimes these binary targets of top half. And don't get me wrong, like 7th as opposed to 21st is a massive difference. But actually 12th or 13th, or even 10th or 15th, I'm not sure that necessarily is as big a difference as actually some of the context, which is whether you're building an identity and a clear style of play, or whether you're building a group of players that can deliver for you next season, young players on permanent contracts that then give you the basis to build on in future campaigns. I also think that's going to be a really important thing for Stoke this season as well, because it does feel very early on, of course, we're only in early October, it does feel like Stoke City are going to be a championship club come 24-25.
And actually, you're absolutely right. Position at the end of the day between 6th and 22nd does not matter. Not one jot. You get the same outcome. It's more
7th and 21st.
Oh, yes. It's more how much change is there going to be next summer? Are we going to have a new manager and 18 new players again? Or are we going to say, you know what, we're nearly there. It didn't quite work last season because we had a slow start, but we just need 1 or 2 more quality additions. The manager's going well. The fans are confident. We've got a good setup behind the scenes. We can go again next season. That fans will take much more happily than us going, well, that's not worked again.
Yeah, well, hopefully Stoke can build something this season. Who have been the top players so far this season that have managed to save it? So obviously excluding Vidigal, he's got injured.
Well, that's it, and I think Andre Vidigal could be a a really high profile player coming in the season. If he's able to stay fit, I think he'll be, a top draw player and, will attract interest in the summer. Ben Wilmot has been lauded as, a really good defender, not just by Stoke fans, by neutrals as well. He's in, he's high scoring in a lot of the metrics charts that people are drawing up, and he is getting attention, and rightly so. Is he being let down by others in the defence? Maybe. For once, Mark Travers is looking like a goalkeeper who we can trust, as opposed to probably the last 4 or 5 years we've had goalkeepers who have really let us down. Mark Travers, Alex Neil said, I think Travers will get us 12 points this season, no doubt, and I can already see that.
Best goalkeeper since Simonson, hopefully.
Probably since Hazme Begovic or Jack Butland in his peak. I'd hope for, certainly. But we've had a long string of good goalkeepers, so to go 4 or 5 years with really poor ones has been really tough for Stoke fans to take. Otherwise, there's been so much chop and change. It's been really hard to name anyone that's been really promising or really influential. I think there's promise with all of them, but we need to see some gelling and clicking, and hopefully we'll get over the game against Leicester, which I'm not excited for in the slightest. And hopefully the international break will do us some good.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Ben, thanks so much for joining us, and all the best to the Potters for the rest of the season, and hopefully catch up with you later in the campaign.
Absolutely. Hopefully we're a little bit more optimistic by then, Gab?
Absolutely. Cheers, Ben. Thanks to all our guests this evening. This has been the EFL Debate Championship podcast. Thanks to you for watching at home, and we'll see you again next week.